Laura. How's it going?
It's good.
Oh, no. I know. Sorry. I have you guys switched around. Oh, wait. You're gone. What is happening? There you are.
There we go.
There we go. Hi, guys. That was Jeff Mudgett. Welcome to History of Haunting. It's a shit show as always. Laura, we are doing part 2 of your special series on H.H. Holmes. And have you ever done a DNA test or any DNA test?
You know what's funny is I have one actually sitting in my drawer that I've been meaning to just spit it and send, and I have not. But
you've never had one done before?
No, my dad did his, so I mean I can see obviously. Half. I got half done.
You got half. Good job. So I've done one. And when I did one, my whole life, I have been told that my father was a full-blooded Cherokee Indian. So I did my DNA test, and my mother, she is wholly from England, Ireland, and Scotland. Like, she is the whole, like...
all the islands.
Right all now. The islands, yes. She is essentially super white. So she had no other countries in her DNA results. So when I got my DNA test back, I found that my Cherokee Indian father was actually not a full-blooded Cherokee Indian. And that was a bit of a surprise to me. I was like, oh, wow, and then when I stopped to think about it, I was like, you know what, that's actually not really that surprising, because I think you'd be kind of hard-pressed to find a full-blooded Native American in this country. Just kind of given like the way they were treated and bringing in the slaves, all of that. So it was a little surprising, but at the same time, not really. And I think a lot of folks that have had the same experience, where they either through something like a DNA test or a conversation with a family member has revealed a surprising fact about their ancestry and their heritage. Well, tonight, guys, in part 2 of our series on H.H. Holmes, we have what, Laura, I think you and I and everybody listening and watching can all agree is a person that got the shock of a lifetime when he found out that he was a descendant of America's first serial killer. Now, Jeff Mudgett, our wonderful guest, is the great-great-grandson of Herman Webster Mudgett, better known as H.H. Holmes, one of his many aliases. Now, Jeff is the author of Bloodstains, a book about Holmes, and he was a distinguished trial lawyer. He is also the star of American Ripper on the History Channel, which you can now find on Hulu. It's an 8-part series. It is phenomenal. You guys. So good, right? It's so good. So the docuseries showcases his search for evidence, proving that H.H. Holmes was none other than Jack the Ripper. Now, Laura, you did cover Jack the Ripper in an episode that I believe we aired a little over a year ago.
Correct?
Yes. So when we had our Patreon, we were doing a true crime series. Laura covered Jack the Ripper. And in the end of the episode, you talked about the possible suspects, right? And what did you have, like 4 or 5 of them, I think?
Right. The typical 4 or 5. And I included H.H. Holmes.
You did, yeah. And I was like, the minute you said that.
Because that is my favorite theory.
I think it's the most plausible one. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's very plausible and interesting. Plus, I find H.H. Holmes fascinating in the way that he was very depraved, obviously.
Right.
We don't admire him, but his tale is so interesting. And the things that he did and he was able to get away with are unrivaled, I think.
I think so too.
Serial killer lore. So, I'm just fascinated by him all the time. And the more I learn, the more I'm like, what the hell?
Yes. Yes.
It's like an onion. It just gets better the more you peel it back, right? His story is just fascinating.
Yeah. So, it's amazing. It's really amazing. So, ladies and gentlemen, we do have Jeff Mudgett, again, the great-great-grandson of H.H. Holmes. And we're going to bring him on here in just 1 second. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Jeff Mudgett. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big history of a haunting welcome to Jeff Mudgett, who has the distinction, although I don't know if he wants it, of being the great great grandson of the man known to be America's very first serial killer. Round of applause for Jeff Mudgett.
Thank you for joining us.
Well,
This is good. Like,
thank you very much, Gary and Laura, and it's quite a distinction, isn't it, to be the great great grandson of perhaps the most evil man in America's history.
I agree. I agree. And we've got so many questions to ask you. And we also invite you to, tell us anything that you want to tell us. Like, if we ask you some questions that you don't want to answer, by all means, let us know. We don't, it's totally fine. But we would like to take a deep dive with you into your research and your investigation. Of course, the show American Ripper that you did with Amaryllis Fox, and where you're at now, because that show, I think that was 5 years ago, 2017, I think that aired on the History Channel. So we've got lots of catching up we'd like to do with you if you're willing.
No, that's great, and that's why I wrote the revision to Bloodstains Redux, because there's at least 10, 12, 15 years more material that I came up with. And, it's going on shows like yours, Laura and Carrie, is great because I'm putting aside search for history and the truth regarding my ancestor because I think I gave it my best shot. I was practically obsessed about it, and to where it was hard to sleep some nights. And now I'm putting him away. I've given the world my best shot, and if that's not good enough for people out there, except for like great shows like yours, then I'm all right with it. I did my best, and it's quite unfortunate because I know what the truth is. I
Yeah.
know what I saw, and I know what I could prove in a court of law if I had to take it back to law, how I practiced in California. So, that's these shows are fun to do for me now. I love your questions, and give me whatever you want, and I'll give you the best response I can.
Okay.
So great.
Wonderful. All right, Laura, take it away.
well, do you want to start off and just let our listeners know how we know that you found out they were related to Holmes via a DNA test, but will you give them the kind of whole background on that, like how it happened, how you felt, and then what kind of got you started on researching into him and looking into him being with the Ripper?
Actually, as I wrote in the book, my grandmother was on our ancestral background, and that was her hobby. And she was convinced we were related to Civil War generals. And when the professionals came back, Laura, with their conclusions, and I captured this in the book, they pretty much told her, "Ma'am, this isn't a good hobby to have. You want to go somewhere else because the answer here was terrible."
Right.
And my grandmother, the way my mother was, she insisted they answer her questions. She paid a lot of money. And one night at dinner, she came clean with the entire family and my grandfather, who, if you think about it, would have been H. Holmes's grandson.
Right.
God.
And
Close.
I'll never forget my grandfather, who was a strange man but very successful in business, and he was a big shot at working for California in the gas and electric company. But I'll never forget him sitting there listening to Grandma describe the truth and this horror that we'd come from, this secret he had kept from the entire family, including her. And I remember going back and forth, looking at him, wondering. I had that question in in my head that I think all human beings would have had. Would my grandmother have married this man had she known the truth?
That's a fair question. That's a
That
fair
is a very
question.
fair question.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, I could see, especially, when it just, two generations removed, why you wouldn't talk about it. Now it's far enough away that it's kind of lore almost, it's a little bit more distant, and now it's like fact versus fiction versus, but back then it's still pretty fresh.
well, I'm the only one in my family that was excited about the project.
Right.
And when we went to the judge to get permission to exhume the grave, I had to go get consent from all the family members. One of them could have said no, and the History Channel project would have been over. And I got them all to do it, but they let me all know, Laura, they weren't happy about what was happening.
Yeah, I can believe that. I can believe that.
I
Are
think
they Were they pretty okay with the Ripper series? Did they watch it? What do they think? Do they believe he was the Ripper? Do they, think they just don't like it at all? Or have you gotten any feedback from your relatives?
That's a great question, and I've never been asked before. And I'll tell you and your listeners all the truth here tonight. My mother and father are the only one that have backed me up at all, and my wife.
Hmm.
But all my family, even my brother's kids and grandkids, I haven't heard one comment, one response, one up or down regarding the History Channel American Ripper.
wow. On the one hand, I'm shocked to hear that, but on the other hand, I understand. Putting myself in your position, your wife's, your children, your parents, but then also like your other family members who are obviously also descendant from H. Holmes, and I think that's so brave of you, really, to pursue this, because I feel like through your book, through the show, and what's been written independently of you, of Holmes potentially being Jack the Ripper, I genuinely think that you are onto something with that. So I think it's really brave of you, because I don't think a lot of folks would have been willing to not only put themselves out there to have this conversation, number one, of who he was, just him alone, but who he potentially could have been as well, and risk that kind of relationship with your family, your extended family. So I'm just, wow. I think that's
Just to uncover the truth. It's great. I
yeah,
think it's, very brave of you.
for sure. Yeah.
So, would you mind
Kind of been like that
summarizing?
throughout my life. And sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, that's okay. I didn't mean to cut you off. But I was just gonna
No,
ask
I've
if
always
you.
been like that throughout my life, and so has my father. My father was an investigator for airplane crashes,
Oh,
and
wow.
a mystery was something he would die for. Excuse the pun, but we both, and that's where I was best at in the legal side, when there was a mystery regarding machinery or forensic science.
Yeah.
And I could see that. I could see that there was obviously something wrong with American history regarding H. Holmes,
Yeah.
Hmm.
that many authors had the story wrong for a long time. You could hear hints from the FBI. You could hear hints from Scotland Yard. You could hear hints from the the Supreme Court regarding how handwriting was to be used in this type of issue. So I knew it was something that should have interested me from the start, and it did. And then I was able to collect the interest of and I'll be the first to mention here on your show the people like History Channel who American Ripper. I'll tell you what, the first 7 episodes when we were in London, trying to put together Holmes being in London and as Jack the Ripper, the actor they picked and the job he did doing the recreations, incredible stuff.
Really?
Now that last episode when we were doing the exhibition was left a lot to be desired, and that was a different story. But history is to be commended. They spent a lot of money on this show. No other network would have done it, and I'm so proud of them that they agreed to back me up, spend their money, and go off on this, what could have been, if we just had a couple breaks, maybe the greatest solving of a true crime mystery in the history of the world.
I could not agree more. I am on board with this. I believe that Holmes is Jack the Ripper. I really do. And when Laura first covered Jack the Ripper and she talks about like the 5 main suspects and she was like H.H. Holmes, and I had known who he was and I was like, oh, come on. And then she like listed out all the reasons and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, hang on.
Yeah. And I told her, I said, go watch this series because it's fascinating and it really makes a great case for Holmes being Jack the Ripper.
It really does.
Yeah. Would you mind laying out the kind of beginning evidence that like got you down this trail? So it's one thing to know that H.H. Holmes is your ancestor. Okay. And you maybe want to look more into him and find the true story. I could see that. But what kind of pointed you in the direction of, like, hey, look at this. Like this kind of leads me, to looking at him being Jack the Ripper. What was it that kind of pushed your investigation in that direction?
Well, my investigation, that's a great question, Laura. My investigation started off with the Murder Castle and The Devil in the White City.
Yeah, that's a great book.
The Devil in the White City. My great-great-grandfather. Think about that. The conscious decisions that he had made were why I was here talking with you today. And so I went off on an incredible investigation into that, visiting the post office there, talking the post office into letting me going down into the basement, which had been sealed for years and years because people thought it was haunted. Just things like that. And, I started getting interest from television people, from paranormal people, a lot of paranormal people, and I kept telling them the story, guys, gals, that basement, that post office, if we did this right, that could be where the paranormal world actually proves something that needs to be shown to the entire world. It's something down there. So I was off on that tangent. And that was my concentration. And I was approached by a couple of fellows who had spent a lot of years of their life putting together the theory about Holmes having authored the Dear Boss letter, the most famous of the Jack the Ripper letters.
For
the
sure.
One where he actually predicts the Catherine Edwards murder. She loses her ear with the knife.
Yeah.
And no, I had the standard response everybody does, right? No, you guys are just looking to sell a book.
Right. Yeah.
That was me.
That's a positive response for most people. And other ones, terrible names you should hear. But they started showing me their evidence where they'd had the handwriting compared by experts that They'd actually had forensic scientists agreeing that it was too close just to be a coincidence.
Yeah.
But I knew, having, worked forensic science law, and I knew how the Supreme Court has said you need much, much more than an expert opinion for us to have ever bought something like that. I uncovered some work that a university up in Buffalo, the University of Buffalo, was doing with some incredible scientists actually working for the FBI, Scotland Yard, the CIA, about putting a computer program together to compare handwriting for the purposes of finding guilt in criminal law.
Okay.
Like DNA, like fingerprints, like photographs. And when you think of it, it's a very powerful piece of evidence if done right. So I contacted them, and they agreed to help me with it. We took the Dear Boss letter, as original as I could find it. Obviously, the British weren't going to give me the original.
Sure, right.
I took some correspondence. Yeah, I took some original Holmes correspondence that I had from the family to them. And they ran those separate samples through their computer system, comparing that handwriting. And lo and behold, it came back over 96% similar. I was shocked. And I was thinking, wait, this can't be just another a Holmes coincidence, because as you spend years investigating this terrible criminal, Carrie, the coincidences just, you overflow everything you do. And pretty soon you start realizing this cagey little devil, these weren't coincidences. He was involved in these things.
Yeah. 1,000%.
One or two, okay, coincidence, but then it starts to, when there starts to be more and more and more, it's like, okay, this just can't all happen to be this way. I mean, to me, that's kind of what pushed me over the edge with the docuseries too. Yeah, because the handwriting in and of itself is compelling, but it's, like you said, it's not foolproof, right? But it is compelling.
Well, and I think
I have to pause you right there. I'm sorry. I just need a 10-minute for I got it.
Yeah.
I got kids walking out, so I don't want to interrupt. Sorry.
We'll pause. Not a problem.
All right.
Here we had the chance, with actual direct forensic science evidence, to prove the greatest true crime mystery of all time.
Yeah.
And it was like handed to me like Christmas, a present. And but then, Laura and Carrie, I started seeing what was involved. The entire world, it seemed, got madder and madder and madder about this California kid with trying to sell a book, thinking he could prove Jack the Ripper. And they were going to do anything they could to shut it down.
I can see that, but
I can see it too,
yeah, but at the same time, like I had said earlier, when Laura was covering Jack the Ripper, and she ended the episode with the suspects, and she mentioned H.H. Holmes, I was like, wait, what? No, that's ridiculous. But then she pointed out this very compelling, albeit circumstantial, evidence. It made me pause. And then she was like, you have to watch American Ripper, seriously. So I'm like, okay. So I watched it, and as every episode went by, I'm like, there actually may be something legitimate here. And I think what did it for me was the moment where you guys had the British, the linguistics of the letters analyzed, where they were saying that, at the time, the letter read something like right away, where at the time in that time in England, they would say straight away, where there was a lot of like American English vernacular in these letters. And I thought, that's really, really compelling.
And that's something, the American slant on it for a long time. I think that's pretty much been accepted, that he was most likely American for quite a while now. I think,
Yeah.
it's starting to become like, that part is starting to become accepted. That based on that letter, and everyone seems to also believe that that is a legit letter. It doesn't really get challenged anymore too much, too mainstream, but yeah, that with the vernacular, like what you were saying, that yeah, they've established that he most likely was American,
Yeah.
which right there, okay, so that's weird in and of itself, right? Just
Yes.
that the greatest crimes in England, were perpetrated by an American.
I'll never forget the two gentlemen you're talking about, the British linguists, telling Amaryllis and I, listen, we can tell this was an intelligent American trying to sound unintelligent or uneducated English, because English don't write like this. Never
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
And they said the kicker was just the title alone, Dear Boss. That was a total Chicago or New York or Philadelphia slang.
Yeah.
And then when what got me in trouble, Laura and Carrie, with the History Channel and those historians there was when I kept insisting to them, listen, we've got a problem here. The whole world has a problem. It's never been able to tie those 5 murders together. Yeah. Can we not just stick with Dear Boss and Catherine Eddowes? Can we not prove Holmes was the author of Jack the Ripper? And leave it there for Scotland Yard to take it further. Leave it there for FBI to take it further, because I was dealing with both those people over the Dear Boss and Jack the Ripper.
Oh God.
And they were giving me tips, and they were telling me the way I should have gone. And the whole time, Laura, I just kept thinking, well, why don't you guys take this now? Here's a letter that your scientists say, the scientists at the University of Buffalo, instead, they came out 97% similar, all right? But instead of saying it was a direct match, they got nervous. They actually refused to come on the show.
Oh, okay.
Really?
They said it was remarkably similar. Which, okay, I've seen defense counsel use toned words down like that when they're arguing a trial, murder trials, yeah. But you could tell they were very nervous about how the world was going to take this, and that.
Oh yeah.
Were it proven wrong, their whole careers would be over. Their whole theory, their whole computer systems would be thrown out the window.
Sure.
I mean, that's how big Jack the Ripper was. So,
yeah.
And so I kept trying to get the show to go with me on, and it's funny, I'll tell your listeners an interesting story that happened while we were filming. It was the 5th or 6th episode, I think. We were in downtown London, staying at a 7-star hotel. The History Channel treated me like a king.
That's nice.
Wow.
I ate well. They'd all go down planning for the next show's production, and I go up at the bar. I mean, it was great, and I'd love to do it again. But one night I was there having a cocktails, and they were down in the playing the next day's shoot, because the production is hard work, and the McGilla production was a good company looking for this to be their break into the Emmys, into so much in all of their careers. They really were.
Yeah.
And they were used to making documentaries on diets and home construction things like that. So this was their run. Oh, it
Yeah.
was so exciting.
Oh man,
And
I bet they were all about this.
so I was up at the bar, yeah, I was up at the bar having a couple cocktails, and these two young gentlemen approached me in suits and ties. Oh, 28, 29 maybe. Well groomed, professional, and they introduced themselves as this and this, and they asked me if I was Mr. Mudgett from the production American Ripper, and they said, we just want you to know that for decades now, Scotland Yard has realized that there was a copycat involved. It was never one man and five murders, but that we disagree with your theory that it was H. Holmes. And they turned around and walked away. And, I was just kind of left there with my mouth hanging open, asking for another drink. But I knew that what we'd opened up and that possibility, somebody like, I mean, here we had BBC doing composite drawings that looked exactly like the Holmes mugshot when he was arrested. I
Yes.
mean,
Uncannily,
it looked
just
like
like
a
him.
copy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And we have witnesses talking about a well-dressed man with his hat and mustache and about 5'9", 5'10", all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're talking about the murders not. And I knew those 5 murders would never hang together in a trial, a court of law.
Right.
They would have indicted the man. They would have indicted the man on much like they did Holmes back in the States. They indicted him on one murder.
One murder.
And then that was enough for them to get their hanging, right?
Right.
So so I knew that's what they would have done. So, and then, I had the FBI come to me and say, the mistake you made, Jeff, was you should have never given those scientists the whole Dear Boss letter. You shouldn't have let them know that's what you were dealing with. You should have taken a sample from that letter and then had them compare that with the Holmes correspondence. Had they not known what we were talking about here, he said, we're convinced they would have come back with a quote unquote direct match. And so I was thinking, how close were to all this? But then like I said earlier, Laura and Gary, that the world didn't really want that true crime mystery solved, I don't think.
And I have to ask why that is. Like, not specifically, like, I think either one of you have that answer, but as a collective, is it just something that's just more fascinating that we don't know who Jack the Ripper is? Or is that what it is? Because I think that's kind of stupid and kind of gross. Like,
it is, but I think that everybody likes that we don't know. It's just this person that came out of the shadows and, did these things and then disappeared. But we all know that that's not how serial killers work. They don't just kill and then go away.
Yeah.
So, and I think the speculation on the copycat with the 5 conical, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, with the 5 murders is the double event. Somebody thinks that the double event was not actually him. That the first one was somebody else, and then the second one was him. Right? Is that correct?
Could you refresh
I have heard that. I don't mean, obviously we don't know, but...
Can you refresh my memory? What was the double event? And for our listeners, what was the double event?
As long as you both take care. I don't know a lot about the other 4 murders. I spent most of my time studying the murder associated with this letter, because that's the only piece of direct evidence the world is ever going to have.
Okay.
And I knew that.
Yeah.
For me,
and that
with the quote Jack. And then the last murder, Laura, the Mary Kelly murder, was so different from the other 4. and that area had murders in it. It's much like someone trying to say because there's 6 murders on Sunday night in Chicago, there must have been a serial killer killing all 6.
True.
No, no, that's not going to go. And then the one that always bothered me too, Carrie, was the Catanetto's murder was reportedly done 1 hour before the Elizabeth Stride murder,
Right.
who they never proved was done by the same man. They assumed it was because
Mm-hmm.
she had had her neck cut with a knife, laid down. It was assumed he was interrupted by witnesses or law enforcement. He ran across town, gathered his wind, and then went about the murder he had wanted to commit in the first place. That methodical, anatomical, removing organs thing with Catherine Eddowes.
Right.
And I just thought that was a big stretch for crime to have taken. And it was always something everybody kind of shrugged their shoulders and blinked at.
Yeah.
And but then we got into that part of American Ripper about Jeff wants to say there was only this one involved with H. Holmes, his great great grandfather, and that Holmes had been there on business. He had been watching the newspaper accounts of the serial killings going on. He
Yeah.
had grown fascinated with the whole thing, and he juiced it up a little bit, and then he'd got on a ship and gone home, and it stopped.
So you think
Which a lot of people find hard to believe that's British too.
I agree. I'm one of those people. That was the other thing, aside from the linguistics analysis, it was the ship passenger manifests that
Yeah.
and the paper trail in Chicago that just stopped and then started again. However many months it was, it like 10 months later, and the ship manifests of people who left Liverpool around the time that the Ripper murders ended that were using aliases that H. Holmes was known to use. Now, okay, maybe coincidence, sure, but there were multiple aliases on these manifests, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, to be honest with you, you're able to prove he boarded a ship in New York. He rowed across the Atlantic, landed in London, and then was in London while the Ripper was being committed. Okay, I was never able to prove that. I was looking forward to that for many years. Couldn't do it. What the only thing, and like you said, every passenger back then, before they had the information, social media like we have now, it was very difficult for them to determine if someone was using an alias on a passenger
For sure.
manifesto, and we couldn't do it. We
Yeah.
couldn't do it. And we didn't have any photographs of him on a ship. We didn't have any photographs of him in London. And I had to repeatedly admit that to those ones that were deniers, that no, had never proven that. But
Right.
what we did prove was that had those scientists been correct, had the earlier experts been correct, saying the handwriting was the same, had the three of us, when we look at those documents and see that it's obviously the same. I mean, an amateur can see that. I mean, It would have been easy convincing a jury of that in a murder trial. It would have been easy.
Yes.
Every jury member there would have said, "You can see it's the same." And what we did prove was that, plus, and Laura, you've probably already seen this, when you get involved in the dates involved in the Dear Boss letter, when it was written, when it was given to Scotland Yard and the London police, when they handed it over to the British media, who published it, okay? And when Catherine Eddowes was murdered, she was found that same night she was murdered. When you put those dates together, Laura, it would have been impossible for the author of Dear Boss to have been anywhere else but in the UK or in England at the time. There's
Right.
no way an H.H. Holmes could have written that letter in New York City.
No.
He couldn't have done it. Impossible.
Yeah.
No.
So all of a sudden, you got to a piece of evidence that takes care of all those things that everyone kept demanding I find.
Right.
You've
It
got to
places
find
him
that
there
you
because he
didn't
has to
prove
be
what
there.
hotel is staying. I don't think we do. I think that letter, if you carefully look at the date and you look at the physical impossibility back then, there were no airplanes flying correspondence. There was
Right.
no fax letters back then. There none of those things. And his signature, the author of that letter that murdered Catherine Eddowes, that cut her left ear off, was in England,
Yeah.
probably London. And all of a sudden, you have an amazing piece of evidence that, as a criminal trial lawyer, I would have loved to have walked into any court of law with.
Right. It would have made your job so
Can you imagine
easy.
Can you imagine putting an FBI agent up on a witness stand, Terry, and cross-examining him, asking him, well, how could anybody else have written that letter?
Yeah. Yeah.
There was no answer.
There is no answer. There is no answer. I find in us talking with you, I find that I'm really disappointed that it sounds like have you stopped trying to prove it? Or have you just been like, I know what is true. I know he was the Ripper. I believe this. And if I can't prove it to anybody else, that's okay. Or are you still working to prove it? Because I find like if you've stopped working to prove it, I would be so sad.
That's a great question. No, it's a great question, and I'm very close to saying, listen, I've done enough. I've given the world that, and I'll tell you another thing, Laura. When we inspected the post office, went down to the basement, and I write about this in my book. If you want to see it, we pull out in one of his hidden escape caves that they left there, the brick caves. We pull out and find a scalpel says made in London. I mean, those little things. Now, does that prove he was in London? No.
No.
But that's the kind of thing that I just say, the world has seen a lot about this. And if the FBI, if Scotland Yard, if the History Channel wanted to take a second closer look at it, just using those dates alone and the impossibility that it was anyone else, then I've given them enough. And they don't have to use me. And it's not, they don't have to buy that from me. That's public knowledge.
Yeah.
It's owned by the world. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. Again, I think it's pretty compelling.
I do too. I'm here for it.
What do you think of the DNA found, a few years ago on the shawl that they matched it to Kosminski? I'm gonna mess up his name. Yeah, Kosminski. I think they called him a couple different things. Do you and he was young, like a schizophrenic.
Was this the Polish guy that was in the mental hospital? Okay.
Do you think he's just like a copycat, or he just happened to be there, or?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
He could have been. See, to me, that doesn't say anything. Like, he could have been a customer.
I'll tell you. You can see I'm having trouble getting my camera centered on this computer, but anyway, I'll tell you both and your listeners. I'm not a Jack the Ripper expert. Okay, I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I studied the Dear Boss letter and my great-great-grandfather's, the probability that he was the author of that letter and the murderer of Catherine Eddowes. That's what I consider myself an expert on. And the
Okay.
other stuff, it goes off on so many tangents. I don't
It
know, but I
does.
can tell you this, Laura, having dealt with DNA when we exhumed the body
Mm.
and they used DNA and the material we dug up and how much they messed that up, the scientists that were said to be the best in the world.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I don't give much credence. I don't give much credence for DNA evidence anymore. I really don't. I,
Wow.
That's fair.
I would,
Hmm.
a current day murder investigation involving DNA, it's probably a powerful weapon, for forensics, but
Yeah.
something 104 years old that the scientist at the University of Michigan, University of Pennsylvania told me had degraded and wasn't effective anymore. And then I go on another show 2 weeks later that his broadcast, Laura, and they're talking about the incredibly accurate DNA they took from dinosaur bones. And I'm like, I don't know where to go with DNA to tell you the truth.
I know
Yeah. Kind of
it's a
crazy.
very yeah, and DNA is a very in-depth and difficult thing to explain. Like on the surface level, it's very basic, right? Like ancestry DNA, we're gonna there's the markers. But when you go to school to learn about it, or even if you I was a juror on a death penalty murder trial, and they had a
Oh,
DNA expert on the stand, and he was
interesting.
explaining the DNA evidence very in very medical terms. It had all of us on the jury just like trying to stay awake. It's exceptionally difficult. It truly is. But and there's so many like opportunities for a misfire. I guess is what I want to
Contamination.
say. Right. Yes, exactly. Like I believe, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the DNA on that shawl from Catherine Eddowes, one, it was never proven she was wearing it that night, was it?
Right.
Right.
No. And like I was saying, he could have been even if she was, he could have been a customer earlier.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
There's so many different possibilities. And plus, we're talking about something that's, been in police
125
custody for how
years.
long?
Yes. Well, I mean, and like
Or
the
custody.
family,
Actually, it wasn't. It was in people sold it, right? Like, so
like a
it's not
family
kind of,
had it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it could have been any number of like places before they had it framed or whatever, before Jeff, you found it. So DNA is very, it can be degraded over time. I don't think that dinosaur DNA is any stronger than human DNA. I really do believe that the DNA on that shawl is still as strong and legitimate as it would have been if DNA analysis had existed back in the 1800s. But there's just too many. I gotta admit, Jeff, I was really crushed when they came back and they said it doesn't match you. I was like, oh, I was so sure it did. I'm like, so I can't even imagine how you felt in that moment, let alone allowing a camera to record that moment.
For sure.
Because I genuinely was like, it's gonna match. It's gonna match. Watch, 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 watch. So it was that was really great television, and I know that it was very difficult for you to put yourself out there like that. But to me, that series, the way that you and Amaryllis investigated and the way they presented how you investigated, for as far as I'm concerned, I believe H.H. Holmes was the Ripper.
Or at least, yeah,
Well,
involved.
well, thank you very much. I'll thank you very much. The next time Scully, that's what I call her. The next time I talk to Scully, I'll tell her you said that. Do you, just to go off on tangent a little bit, you'll get a kick out of this. You know where she's at right now?
No way.
Mm-mm.
She's, uh, she's Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the guy running for president's daughter-in-law.
Yes, I did know. I did know that she was married to one of his children. Yeah, I love the dynamic between the two of you. I really love, and it kind of, honestly, it reminded me of Laura and I, frankly, because Laura is the skeptic on this show. I am a full believer in the paranormal. I've had paranormal experiences,
Oh, yeah.
and Laura's like, okay, that sounds compelling, but what if it's this, that, or the other thing? And I was watching the dynamic between the two of you on the show, and I thought, she's freaking Laura. Yeah. But then I watched as she became more invested as the episodes went on, because the things that you guys were finding was so compelling to her. It's I'm glad to know that you guys are still in contact. I think that's really great. What does she think after the show? And it's been 5 years since the show. Does she what are her thoughts on it? Do you know?
She and I don't get into it too much. I have a kick playing with her about, there was a part of the production that obviously wasn't included on the show, but when the body was exhumed and it had been articulated and was down at the lab at the University of Pennsylvania, and they were trying to, the two scientists there were trying to identify it as H. Holmes on the order of the court. Amaryllis and I, we kind of snuck around the corner from where everyone was having their coffee, getting ready for the next shine of bones, and the camera crew were thinking about their next shoot, and they were all very talented people. Great, the director I still admire him, and he wasn't in that last episode, so. But Amaryllis and I snuck around the corner. We went to look at the body laying there on the scaffolding, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And think of Laura, okay? And your eye, and we're walking down to see the body, and we both stop up short seeing the body, and I smacked her in the arm, and she goes, "Ah, man, that's a monkey." And I'll never forget that, because she was a skeptic like Laura, but she was very honest with facts.
Yeah.
And she could tell that was him. See, it was immediate, it wasn't him, and but that wasn't a part of the show. So.
Wow, really?
That's interesting.
That is interesting. I really like that. I
So have you, after the show ended, I mean, we've watched it.
A
and
bunch.
you have a lot of compelling
We've
evidence.
watched it a bunch.
Yeah. Have you, found any more leads or any other interesting things that that kind of support the case for him being in London at that time, or being involved in the murder of Catherine Eddowes?
No, other than in all these years, Laura, no expert, no scientist, no forensic, prosecutor, no district attorney, no FBI agent, no Scotland Yard investigator has contacted me to say I was full of baloney.
Oh.
That's true.
None whatsoever. And we told them what was obviously going on there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have thought that would have happened in the years since. We never did find any positive evidence, a photograph, a video of Holmes in London.
Mm-hmm.
And there were no positive eyewitnesses of Jack the Ripper himself, to tell you the truth.
True, there weren't. Yeah.
So
No, in that area too.
But then, Laura, the way television documentaries and history works now, even if we found a photograph that looked like Holmes, like the BBC's drawing did,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
they would have found some reason why it wasn't him. That's kind of the way it works now.
Yeah.
And rather than saying, "Wow, there's a great shot here. We got to look deeper into that evidence. We got to take a second, harder look.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced that if the scientists wanted to, and if they were capable of, Laura, they could take that same evidence I gave them, they still have it, and they could try to prove it wasn't the same man. But you know what we did have instead, Laura, about 6 months ago?
Mm-mm.
I had a very famous numerologist to me, and he said, Jeff, do you know what the odds are? We were looking at this, my colleagues and I,
Mm-hmm.
of of H. Holmes and Jack the Ripper on opposite sides of the Atlantic at same time of the 19th century. These two infamous killers having that remarkably similar handwriting would be. He said, we're talking about Hubble telescope numbers.
Infinitesimal.
Universal. He said, the odds of that are higher than if it was the same man that wrote it. And I walked away from that meeting thinking, that's another piece of evidence, Laura, that I'd never get anywhere in a court of law. I would never get anywhere on a television show. Find the just slap between the eyes, because think about that. The odds of those two infamous killers having the same handwriting and not being the same man.
No, that you make a great point, because that is so unlikely.
It is. Like you said, the odds are infinitesimal. Like that, there's just you can replicate a person's look, right? You can wear the bowler hat. You can maybe be the same height. You can have the same mustache. You can have the same imitate the same gait, the same walk, but you cannot replicate fingerprints. You cannot replicate writing style. Handwriting, these are all things that are specific and unique to every individual. So, I mean, Jeff, I gotta ask, what if you were actually successful in proving that Holmes was the Ripper? What would
general public,
to the general public, or even maybe Scotland Yard or the FBI? You know what I mean? Like, what if they were like, you know what? We believe H. Holmes, Herman Webster Mudgett was Jack the Ripper. What would your feeling be at being proven right in your belief and to prove that he was Jack the Ripper? What would your emotion or reaction be to that?
Wonderful question. It's not anything. I would not be proud of having, proven that the case. I would be proud of having taken something that billions in the world have considered one time or another in their life over 250 years now. No one's ever come up with a plausible explanation, and to have been the one that proved that the case would be something I would be proud of. But as far as having him been my ancestor, no, and I doubt many in my family would be happy about that.
Right, yeah.
Right.
And then the Hollywood guys would run with the story.
Yeah.
And they'd come up with a sinister movie that the world could watch, and it's a great question. It doesn't have a great answer.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been a lot of money for me. I mean, Hollywood wouldn't have to pay me for that. That's owned by the world,
right?
And it's not. So that's not what it was all about. But and then it's. I don't know. That's kind of where I've been my whole life, wanting to investigate those types of mysteries.
Yeah.
I was always uh, the mystery about who was buried in that grave that we exhumed that last episode is far bigger than Jack the Ripper, if you ask me.
I agree,
And
and I think it was a little.
that we
I loved that last episode because I think it was so bizarre, his request, because you guys got to that, like, you dug down and then you got to that bottom part and you were like, there's nothing here, and then you dug further and I'm like, who does that? Who requests that? And also, who is allowed to have those requests granted that's a murderer and is being hung for? I thought that was so fascinating that was like where you ended up. I just thought that was so bizarre that he was allowed to have this odd burial, I guess.
you know, it's where I quickly saw that I think differently than a lot of people. We're digging away, right? And see, now I know if Carrie and you, Laura, had been there with me, I know exactly where your thoughts would have been on this now.
For sure.
When we were digging and we came on, which no one had told us about, that we knew there were two graves there, but we didn't know that there was a fake coffin in the one, full of this clay-like molding material.
It was so crazy.
And and I'm there and I'm jumping up and down and thinking, wait a minute, we've just discovered something incredible. This con man, perhaps the most successful fraud in American history, who made a living making life insurance companies pay him benefits after substituting corpses and falsifying dental records to prove identity. That's what he did for a living.
Yes, he did.
All of us take coffin. We dig over to the next and go down 2 feet deeper and we find the concrete tomb of legend and lore.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there thinking, come on, wait. Let's slow down. We got to find out what that fake coffin was all about. That was about some substitution of a corpse. There was something there to this fraud. And they all threw back at me, no, that was a hoax. That was his way of getting a grave robber to stop if they dug up the wrong coffin. And I'm thinking, but that would only work if we had found it on top of the concrete, not to the side in another grave.
Yes.
And those are the kind of things, Laura, that I was just, my mind was running circles on the possibilities, what had gone on with this, and they didn't want to accept how genius evil this man was. That this was a different kind of human being.
Yeah,
he was different. And these two graves, this fake coffin, this concrete, this body. That, I can't, and I'm waiting for another TV channel one day after shows like yours to give me a chance to take a second look at that body we exhumed, because I think I can prove it wasn't him. With the evidence I have in my...
I like that idea.
So
I really do.
The DNA wasn't matched. The DNA did not match mine. Yeah, I still don't know where History Channel got off with that on the show.
Huh. That's interesting.
That was just a whole anyway. But I'm convinced that if I ever got another chance with shows like yours, having someone listen out there that has the ability to maybe influence someone with that capability, I'd love to be able to go back on to show that this was perhaps the most I don't know. It's hard word. It's a hard word to. You don't want to say incredible because that gives it a positive aspect.
Sure.
The most unbelievable escape from justice and substitution of another body in place for him, where he could. My family. I'll tell you this, and you can both throw this out on your show. It's fine. 3 or 4 members of my family think Holmes lived out his life in California. My father thinks he knows where he went.
Wow.
We've got a picture of my grandfather and his brother standing over a grave outside of Los Angeles. And there's no way a judge is ever going to give us permission to do another exhumation on Holmes again after
Right.
that
Right.
exclamation about that being made. But they still think that, and it's just that is a much more fascinating story than Jack the Ripper ever would be.
I agree. I
It is.
absolutely
Wow.
agree. I think that maybe, and you both have talked a lot about the collective world's mindset, right? On Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper is this infamous kind of boogeyman now, right?
Hmm.
London has multiple nightly tours of Whitechapel, of Jack the Ripper's killing. This is where they found this one. This is where they found that one. This is, like London almost, I don't want to say celebrates it, but they certainly capitalize on the murders of this man. They also capitalize on the reported paranormal aspects of that whole area. And I think that the world at large, as far as the mindset, wants to keep Jack the Ripper as a mystery. So that certainly speaks to the pushback, the
Well,
ignoring that you've received, Jeff, when from some of these, Scotland Yard, the FBI, what people on social media, whatever, I think the world at large would rather not know the identity of Jack the Ripper. They're
I agree
perfectly
with that.
content with it.
And people, I don't think, give the Ripper as much credit as he's due for being a very efficient killer.
Yeah.
And also, and that's why I also think it would be H. Holmes. He was very efficient. He was very good at what he did.
Yeah.
He was very skilled. And he was very skilled with a knife. We know this, right? All of that, all of these things that we know, right, for a fact. We know
Right. It's
it
in all the police
translates so
reports.
well.
Yes, for sure.
And kind of to what Jeff was saying, like if there's anybody that could get away with getting out of the gallows, I mean, I think AJ Jones could do it.
I
That
think
man
so
was
too.
like, I mean, scarily brilliant. What he put it towards is obviously terrible, but I mean,
Yeah.
what he had quite the mind. You got to realize, like, when just putting together the murder castle, what they call it now, like he had to have all these plans and all this stuff in his head, and then he
Yeah.
would divide which people did what and all the contract,
Well,
all
and
this
all
stuff,
the
and plus all the
cons that he.
swindles and the guns, and yeah, I mean he
Yes.
had to be charming and and very quick on his feet. I mean, just even that, I know we didn't have the photos and all the stuff we have now that can place people wherever, but until this isn't a true thing. But I mean, wow, like was prolific
He really
at
was. He really was.
in his crime spree.
Yeah.
But it wasn't even a crime spree. It was really just how he lived his life, pretty
That
much.
was just, yeah, everybody was just like collateral damage or whatever it was. There was nobody. Which actually, Jeff, I have a question. So, are you the descendant? So, he married a woman. I believe, was her name Clara?
Clara.
Okay. Are you the descendant of their children? Is that because did he have children? He'd married a couple of people, but I don't know if he had children with anybody but his very first wife.
They had a son named Richard, who had a son named Bertram, who was my grandfather.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Makes sense.
So you are the great great
And then she
grandson of
went and
his.
married another man.
Okay.
She went and married another man. But that's one of the other parts of the story, Laura, that I find so fascinating with with the women, and the way they dealt with him, knowing what he was. That this woman Clara, while he was waiting at Moyamensing prison to be either executed or escape, however you want to put it, she visited him 3 times, making separate trips back to Chicago and immediately back to his prison cell.
Really?
And anybody with any knowledge of Holmes knows what she was doing. And that was giving him the assets to pull off this escape and this substitution, separate graves, other coffins, all of these things.
Such weird stuff.
And then he arranged for a biography that Hearst Corporation paid him $7,000 for before the so-called, which no one knows where that money went. You know, none of the family. And
interesting.
It was just, and you see those artist depictions of him, Laura, sitting in his prison cell, writing.
Oh, right.
He's dressed like he's going out to perform a Friday, and his other boots are hanging on the prison cell belts and his ties. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, what was going on here? And then the thing that I find, one of those Holmes coincidences, Carrie, that mean nothing, couldn't be proven for anything, probably not, but that I find fascinating. 2 months after the execution and supposed burial, the superintendent at Moyamensing prison blew his brains out in his office at the prison. And you almost know there had to be someone helping Holmes through this whole thing. He couldn't have done it by himself.
He couldn't have
lifted the concrete block himself.
No, he couldn't have. And he was such a good con man that it's not surprising that he would be able to get somebody on the inside there at the prison to assist him in this. Because I'm sorry, you guys, what was the name of the guy that was one of his last murders, who had a wife? They were gonna get a life insurance policy out on I can't remember the guy's name.
Yeah, it's right on the tip of my tongue. It's the one he was indicted for murder for.
Right.
Yes.
The one he actually got caught on.
Then he murdered the 2 daughters and the son.
Yes.
As well.
So
I can't remember the name.
I can't remember either. I just watched the episode about this guy last night. But he's that suave. He was that charming. This man clearly knew what he was doing way back when he had his murder castle and the World's Fair, and he was doing all that. This guy was like his right-hand guy. And he was like, oh, you want to take a life insurance policy out on me? And then we're going to pretend I'm dead? Great, sure. That sounds like a perfect idea. I completely trust you. And then... So Holmes was just this silver-tongued devil. So it doesn't surprise me.
Think about him using the one little daughter to identify her father's decomposed corpse.
Yes.
So the life insurance company would pay on the policy.
Yes.
Think about that.
Yes, exactly.
And then she disappears.
Exactly. Right. I'm telling you,
And then she's not there. She's not there to testify at the murder trial.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, the H.H. Holmes is like an onion. There's layers and layers and layers of interesting coincidences, or fact versus fiction kind of mysteries, all kind of offshooting off of him. I do find him just totally fascinating,
utterly fascinating.
Yeah, Jeff, do you believe in the paranormal or any of that? Do you have any experiences that you would like to share?
I'm glad you asked that, because I was afraid to get into that when I first started writing the book and then the revision lately, because I knew there would be some in the true crime world, the Jack the Ripper world, and then my trying to prove that it wasn't him in the burial. Some of those people would be set off by it. But when we first, Laura, when we first inspected, were given permission to go down into the basement of the post office where the murder castle was originally built. One of the strangest things of the whole Holmes story that I can't get anyone to jump in with me on is how in the world could our Department of the Post Office Department, how in the world could they have purchased the old murder castle with the land it sat on, tore it down, actually built down into portions of the basement where some of those murders were committed without investigating any of the evidence, and then built a United States Post Office on top? I still have problems with that one. I don't know why they did that, but when we first went to, if you ever, there's still bus tours to the post office as far as the murder castle is concerned.
Yeah, there is. I've looked into them.
Let's be careful, because the grounds there are so dangerous in America. It's a very dangerous area of Chicago, maybe the most dangerous. So when my friend Kim and I, my best friend from college basketball days, we went to the post office. Everyone there was African American working there, and Kim was African American, and Kim talked the superintendent there into allowing us into the basement because of who I was.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And it had been barricaded off, the door.
Oh.
And the custodian hadn't been down there in years. So when he removed the boxes, all the employees were watching what's going down into. And I'm on your question, Laura, about the paranormal.
No. I believe you. I'm invested.
I'm invested. Keep going. I'm like, go on.
I'm like, why would they even close off the basement? The postal system, they always need.
It's a federal building.
It doesn't make sense.
I know. It's a post office. I know. Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't want to go down there, and for obvious,
Sure.
So, and we're going through the spider webs, going down the dusty staircase around the corner, and it's dark, and we get this hallway goes for 200 feet, and it's everything out of a Stephen King book and a Alfred Hitchcock movie. Okay, everything.
Oh God, say less. Let's go tomorrow. I'll be in Chicago tomorrow. Let's go.
Well, they wouldn't let the History Channel go back down there.
Really? No cameras? No nothing?
No.
Really?
But the History Channel didn't ask right. They didn't let me go in there and ask for us because of who I was. And when we went down there, it was musty and dirty and rats and spiders and the whole thing. And when I first went down those steps, Laura, and I would hope your listeners will give me a break on this, I thought all you paranormals were pretty goofy.
Fair. We've gotten that a lot. It's fair.
I didn't believe in any of the world paranormal. We died. Well, in about an hour down there, I had my first epileptic seizure.
Oh.
The doctors still don't know why I developed that condition.
Wow.
And that seizure put me in a realm off by my side where it wasn't voices, it wasn't visions. I can't go off and say I'm going to be on one of the ghost hunter shows with that kind of stuff. but it was a feeling, an energy, a presence that I would swear on a stack of Bibles. And when I came back up after we had inspected that basement, I was a believer. I knew that there was something else. I didn't think the paranormal world had been defining it properly yet. It was more of a I don't think they're ever going to see a ghost running across the closet, but they're going to develop presences, and energies, and maybe in another realm or zone, something like that. But and then Laura, when I went back, when we were digging up the grave in 2017, we had it's for night. Production crew was tired. They'd put their cameras away. They'd put a tarp over the graves. The bodies were still in it, and we were all going back to the hotel for dinner. And I'd seen them drive off, and I'd snuck back around the trees. If you go on my Bloodstains page, you'll see some of those pictures of those graves.
Yeah.
And I snuck back under the tarp. It was getting dark, and I instantly had another one of the seizure that I'd had down in the basement, and felt those same presence and energy. So I'm a believer that there is something there. I don't know if the paranormal world has defined it properly yet, and I think it's just out there waiting for somebody to do it right.
Yeah.
I have a question. Laura, I'm sorry, Laura. I have a question for you, Jeff. When you had that very first seizure down in the basement of the post office, did it feel like Holmes, or did it feel like one of his victims? Because
the one in the post office basement, Carrie, felt like Holmes. The one down in the grave did not.
Well,
okay.
Well, and that would have been another one of his victims, right? If it's not him.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I don't. Laura, I know you know where I'm going with this. I don't. You do. I don't really announce it. Not really announce it, but I don't really boast about it or really talk about it a whole lot on the show. But I am an evidential medium. And what that basically means is that I have the knowledge, the abilities, or psychic, whatever you want to call them, in a way that allows me to provide evidence of something that happened in the past, something that happened in, what have you. When you were talking to me, or talking to the listeners rather, about your seizure in the basement, and I asked that's why I asked you, what did that seizure feel like? That was what I'm getting for sure, H.H. Holmes. When you had the seizure in the grave, that was definitely a victim. That's why I was asking you, what did those seizures feel like? And so my mother has a form of epilepsy, and it's called petit mal seizures is what she has, where she sort of blacks out. They're not like this kind of seizures that most people think of when they hear epilepsy, like the shaking on the ground. My mother has very different seizures. And what I got was you had a petit mal seizure in both locations, where you just sort of blacked out, not necessarily shaking on the ground. That might not be right. Maybe you did have a grand mal seizure. But what I'm getting is that H.H. Holmes was your first seizure, and you're getting close. That's what I'm getting. It may not make any sense to you, but that's. I'm being.
It does, and I'm glad you brought this up because you're the first that's ever, and I've always kind of wondered about how people would take what I'm trying to share with them. But I'll tell you this: the reason I know I did not see a face, I did not hear a voice that I knew was Holmes.
Yeah.
What I knew was the presence, the energy down there wanted me to hurt my friend Kim.
Yeah.
It wanted me to hurt my best friend.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
The one in the grave, the one in the grave wanted to tell me thank you.
Yeah, almost a desperation.
For what we were doing.
Yeah, almost a desperation.
Yeah.
You're getting close. That's what I'm getting, and like I said, I just get what I get, and I can tell you what I'm getting, and if it makes sense to you, great. It doesn't make any kind of sense to me. But down there in the basement of that post office, that's him. He's down there. Is
That's
it?
interesting.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
too bad. It's too bad nobody can get access to go back to the scary, very creepy sounding basement. But you know what? I mean, I will say it sounds terrifying, but also would absolutely love to go down.
Well, and I have a question
same
though.
breath,
Right? Yeah, I have
yeah.
I have a question. Is that basement?
If we convinced them we were going to do it right, I write about this in Bloodstains Redux. There was one of my anesthesiologists and one of my neurologists. Both were fascinated with what I was telling them about the seizures, and that epilepsy wasn't supposed to come on at 40 and you've never had it before in your life.
It's not.
It's supposed to be something you've lived with, and Carrie, you're exactly right. I have a lot of petite malls, but I've had 2 grand malls, and I've woken up in the back of an ambulance, and we have him back, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Where I was gone, and then in the hospital days, but. I'm convinced if we went and if Kim and I were able to go in and talk to the post office people about doing it right, about filming it professionally, and about trying to prove something that the world might be fascinated with seeing something or feeling something about.
Yeah.
We might get them to allow us to do it again.
I mean, I think that would be amazing. I think, is the basement in the post office, is that the same basement of the hotel, or it's just...
No. There's about a 2 or 3 foot overlap.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just like...
It doesn't actually need to be, though, because the people that died in that building and were tossed down into that basement for Holmes to do what he did, they're still there. It doesn't need to be the same.
The bad juju energy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
there was a lot of bad juju that happened in there.
So, right, and like I said in the beginning...
If there's anywhere that's going to have bad juju energy, I think that area would probably be pretty high on my list.
Right, exactly. And like I said...
And I'll tell you now, and you and your listeners, I don't know how. I get people that want to fight with me about he killed 14 or he killed 21 or he killed. I don't know how many he killed. Yeah. All I know that when you review, Laura, the murder trial he went through, when you review that 14-month that the DA had the indictments over, and that's what the trial was about, 14 months, he killed an entire family with 2 14-year-old girls and an 8-year-old boy. He cut them up into pieces.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? How many do you have to prove he killed on other years of his life? I don't know. But I know in that murder castle there were some.
Oh yeah. And that murder castle is famous.
The Chicago police never identified the victims down there. They never did. But that's because during that murder castle, when it was in operation, that hotel, you had the World's Fair going. 2 miles down the road.
Yeah.
And there were literally millions from around the world visiting that fair.
Yeah.
And Chicago police admitted that they lost 20, 30, 40 people that they never found.
Yes.
Never found.
Yes. I just listened to a podcast about this. There was just too much. They were not prepared for the volume of people in the city at the time. And Holmes knew that. Holmes counted on that. Yeah, he counted on that. That the police would be spread too thin. There'd be way too many people. Also, brothels were a big deal in Chicago at the time. So, I really want to investigate that basement in the post office.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I really do.
Character in American history, there's no doubt about it. And it's
for sure.
It's that I got to tell you that if we ever get a chance to do a second look at that exhumation with I'll tell you this, when they closed the show off, and history you got to give them credit, all right? Yeah. I try to give them credit every show I go on. They were told how much that exhumation was going to cost.
Right. It's not cheap.
As we were digging, the walls were caving in all around, and they had to bring in these engineers to shore it up. And then we have a concrete block worth thousands of pounds, weighing thousands of pounds, and the DNA and all this, and they spent a fortune. Those poor people, and the show didn't get as many viewers as they thought it was going to have. And so you got to give them credit, because no other network would have backed me up and given me the chance to have that exhumation. Yeah. They wouldn't have been. But so they wanted out of it. And then Laura, think about this. If we had come back on that show, if they had let me, and we had shown where, and I tried to prove it for the show, that it wasn't him, the evidence proved it wasn't him. Mm-hmm. What would history have had to have done then with the wrong man, a substituted corpse? What would the Philadelphia police have had to have done? What would the Commonwealth of Philadelphia have had to have done?
Oh my
what would that
God!
Cemetery have had to have?
Yes.
I don't know.
That's crazy.
But there would have had to have been a serious investigation into who that body was.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then what? And then where he ended up? Holmes? Like, where did he go? Like, where did AJ Holmes end up? Like, yeah.
I feel like if that were the case, and it wasn't him in that grave, and he did disappear, like finding him then would have been exceptionally difficult. I don't know as we would have. Yeah.
As far as being a killer too, he wasn't. It doesn't seem. Well, I don't know, but it doesn't seem like he was. He seemed very rational in a lot of the stuff that he did. But also, if he got out of there, he could because the police never caught him, right? It was the insurance company, so he could have gone on doing the same scheme across the country, and nobody would have caught him.
Right, shave the mustache, change the hat. Like, he could have. Yeah. He was such a chameleon. And so charming. He had, 4 wives.
Right?
Yeah.
I feel like he could have left and moved around and done pretty much whatever he wanted.
I think so, too. Shit, Laura, you and I could be his ancestors. I mean, we don't know.
I gotta send my kid in.
I tell you what, if ever the history was unveiled and honestly true, I think what we'd find, Carrie, was that he did not kill 200 people.
Yeah, no.
That was way out legend and lore baloney.
For sure.
We don't know how many he killed, but we know that it was in 12, 13, 14 and a number, and with children involved. Yeah. And that the crimes that he committed were some of the worst in American history.
Yes.
And deserve a second look to see how this man was capable of committing them and getting them successfully,
Yeah.
because you wouldn't have thought that would have been the case.
Yeah. For
And
sure.
it was a very cagey devil that was premeditated, playing chess ahead with each con, with each fraud, with each crime.
Yeah.
And he was very good at it. You know where he got in trouble, Laura? He got in trouble. His big mouth got him in trouble a couple of times.
Oh
He,
yeah.
he had a
That's
big
right.
he talked too much
That's
sometimes when he was
right.
arrested for another, and his ego got him in trouble.
As it always will. Your ego will always fuck you over in the end. It really will. Yeah, for sure.
It did him. That's where the insurance company got him. Over the comments he was making in that St. Louis jail cell.
Yeah.
The fellow that went whistleblower for everybody.
Yeah.
On what Holmes had said, and that's what they used to get him.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, we have a question from a viewer. We had let everybody know that we were going to be interviewing you. We have a question from a viewer. Her name is Donna Annan. And Donna would like to know, do you feel like any of the victims have tried to reach out to or communicate with you?
Oh boy. Don, I've never been asked that, but you're right on the money. Yeah.
Really? Yeah, because I feel like you've stirred some stuff up.
When one of the seizures, yeah. And it's there's a recent book I read, Laura, about Holmes, and I had never realized this before. But Holmes, when he was younger, actually experienced grand mal seizures too.
Really?
Oh wow.
And those, he talked about losing track of time and place and coming back, not knowing where he'd been for a couple of days. And what a terrible thought to conceive, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What was he doing? What was he doing at that time? This evil man.
Yeah. Have you ever, seizures aside, either in your dreams or just, have you ever had what's known as a visitation dream? Do you know what those are?
No.
So visitation dreams essentially are where the spirits of the dead, they can be loved ones, they can be anybody, visit you in your dream state. And visitation dreams are very different from the average dream in that you know that you're dreaming and you know that you're speaking to somebody that has died. But you know that it's them, that it's real. A couple of indications that dreaming of somebody that has died are that they don't, when you are talking with them, they don't move their mouths. And the reason for that is because they're communicating with you telepathically. Because when you die, you're pure energy, right? So when they're visiting you in your dream, they don't need to vocalize. They don't need that physical, the physicality of speech, because they're just energy. So you can have a conversation with somebody in your dream, but it's just telepathically. Have you ever experienced anything like that, either from him or from loved ones that you have lost, or maybe his victims? Have you ever experienced anything like that regarding, unfortunately, your great-great-grandfather?
Yes.
Have you? Would you be willing to tell us about it, or just, if you want to just leave it at yes, that's absolutely fine.
Can we? You mentioned I'd be happy to tell you and your listeners about it if it's something that helps other people. And you mentioned that we might put two of these shows together, and then you'd put that out. I'm getting a little bit tired, ladies, right now, and could we come back for the second one and pick that up?
Yeah, absolutely. We absolutely can. We absolutely can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was it's such a pleasure. Appreciate your
Yes.
time and effort and energy. And I know with the tech issues, it's always a little bit of a pain for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was illuminating and a lot of fun for me.
Thank you so
Personally,
much.
and appreciate it.
Yeah.
I got to tell you both. I've done scores of these podcasts over the years, and this was perhaps my favorite. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. That's really nice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're super excited. Yeah, let's continue this. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I think we left it on a really great teaser, actually. So we are going to be back with the next part of our interview with Jeff. Jeff, thank you so much for being on part 1. And we're super grateful that you want to go ahead and continue this. We have a lot of different questions to ask you with regard to the paranormal side of this. And thank you so much for being so forthcoming and answering all of our nosy questions. For sure, nosy questions. But yeah, to that end, we are going to end this episode, guys. We will be back with the next segment, our part 2 interview with Jeff Mudgett, the great-great-grandson of H.H. Holmes. But more than that, you guys, this is an individual who is a distinguished trial lawyer and somebody who genuinely is fighting to prove what he believes in. And I think that deserves all of the attention in the world. So we will be back next week with the conclusion of our interview with Jeff Mudgett. To that end, Laura, as we always say here on History of a Haunting, stay safe out there because you never know who
Or what
is listening. Bye, guys. Thank you so much, Jeff. We will see you next week.
Good night, ladies.